next guest you all know. He's been here as host. Dick stars in the soon-to-be-released film How to Beat the High Cost of Living, and will also be seen in First Family. He's a fine actor. Would you welcome Richard Benjamin? You want to finish the monologue you started the night I saw you fill in for me, and you had a seal come out on the stage at the wrong time, I assume.
Well, see, the seal was supposed to come out later.
That's what I found out, yeah.
Yeah. And everyone knew the seal was out except me.
And you were doing the jokes?
Yeah, I wasn't getting a lot of laughs, but the seal was starting to get laughs, and I thought I was getting the laughs. But of course, it was the seal, and then Fred said to me, "He's out." And there he was, and my little friend was out scampering all over the place. And then Fred had a good idea that I do the monologue over here with Ed, which is...
And did it here?
Yeah, yeah.
Which doesn't help, does it, when you have to sit down here?
The seal has his own show now.
I hope so.
Yeah.
You know, there was a famous act, I don't know if you are old enough to remember it, called Professor Lamberti. And Professor Lamberti used to come out in vaudeville, and he had the xylophone. And he was kind of silly, and the hair was kind of frizzy, and full tails. And he'd start to play the xylophone, and in the back of him, they'd send out this beautiful stripper. It was part of the act, of course. And she would start to take her clothes off. And of course, Lamberti thought the applause and cheers were for him, and he just went crazy. It was one of the great acts in vaudeville. And the more they applaud, the crazier he would get to play the xylophone.
Well, that's what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't quite work out like that way. But if I could get the seal to take off his clothes, that might work.
You have been an actor most of your life, haven't you? I mean, that's about all you've really ever done.
Right. Yeah, it's all I'm equipped to do, I think. I can't...
Well, why do you say that? You mean you've never had any other jobs?
Oh, well, I've had jobs, yeah. I mean, jobs that I took, you know, to make money to pay rent and get food and stuff, and all jobs that I lied to people and said, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life, because if they found out what I was really doing, they wouldn't give me that job.
Of course.
Because they don't want to give actors jobs, because they leave as soon as they get a regular acting job.
What kind of jobs you do? Waiter?
I worked for an airline. And I was on the phones. I was reservations on the phone. And when I went there, I just graduated from school, and I went there, and they said, well, you know, what had you been doing? I've been studying theater, and I couldn't lie about that. And they said, well, why are you here? I said, well, I've changed my mind about the theater. And I've decided that I want to work for this airline for the rest of my life.
Lied right to them.
Right to them. So they bought that, and then they let me work these phones. Now, on the phone, I can say the airline, because the airline's all right. It was American Airlines.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to say on the phone, American Airlines, the flagship airline, Mr. Benjamin speaking.
That's good.
Yeah. I would say, the phone would buzz, and I'd pick it up, and I'd say, yeah? And somebody would say, I'd say, where do you want to go? And they'd say, Boston. I said, I can handle that. And if they paused and said, well, the trip begins in Boston, and then I want to make a I just shut him off.
You didn't want to...
Well, I didn't know how to handle any of that.
You just wanted to...
I could get him to Boston and maybe back.
Anything else, you got disconnected?
No. When I used to say all that, they would monitor the phone calls, and they'd call you in and say...
How long did you last?
I was there 3 months at the airline. No, I was there until they monitored my phone call. Yeah. And I said, they said, you've got to say Mr. Benjamin, the flagship airline, American Airlines, Mr. Benjamin speaking. And I said, by the time I say all that, they've called United by that time.
So you just say, yep, what is it?
Yeah. And I said, they're only calling here because they want to go somewhere anyway. They know where they're calling.
Yeah. Obviously, when you were a kid, you wanted to be an actor. When you watch movies, because I was a movie buff, I can remember the first movie I ever saw was a comedy with a fellow by the name of Charlie Chase.
Oh,
early comedian.
Yeah.
Early comedian. You remember I think I was 7 or 8 years old. First picture I really remember seeing.
My first movie was Pinocchio. And before I went to the movies, I think I was about 5, I was afraid of the dark, and I didn't sleep at night and stuff like that. Had to have all the lights on. So I was very suspicious of any place that I hadn't been before, especially if it was dark in there. So we went to this theater, the RKO 81st Street on Broadway, and there was Pinocchio out there. And I said, before I went, I wanted my mother to show me the layout here. What's this going to be like? Where are we going? We go in there. How dark is it in there? All this kind of stuff. So there was this billboard out in front of the theater, and it said, Pinocchio, and then underneath it said, Edward G. Robinson in 10 Little Indians.
I remember that picture.
Yeah, do you remember what happens in that picture?
They murder everybody.
Yeah.
They murder everybody in every possible way imaginable.
With axes, poison, garroting,
poisons,
yeah.
right. Garroting,
Yes.
everything, you name it. So I said, what's this? What's the other picture? Is this another movie that's going to be this, or is he in this picture? He said, no, that's another movie, my mother said, just to get me in there. I said, is it a comedy? She said, yeah, it's a comedy.
Tender Lindy's.
Right. I said, is it a kind of comedy where a man stands up and tells jokes? Yes, that's the kind of comedy it is. Well, I haven't gone to sleep yet from that picture.
You know, when you start talking about being scared, I thought of something that I now see on the Z channel that used to terrify me when I was young. And it's the Paramount newsreel, where the camera comes around and points directly at you.
Yeah.
And I remember that when I was a kid, it used to scare me.
Yeah.
They'd go da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, and this thing would turn around, and they would go into close, and it would be looking right at you.
Yeah.
And I see that at home now, and I still get scared.
Yeah, you
Sitting in my own home watching a camera, and I turn away.
You don't get over any of that. The second time I went to the movies, which Lord knows was a long time after that, was a Charlie Chan picture. And,
Which Charlie Chan?
well,
How are you in trivia?
I don't know. I'll tell you what it's about, and will you be able to tell me what it...
I'm trying to see if it was
Oh,
Sidney.
who was it? Oh,
it was
it-
Warner Olin, Sidney
Toller.
Toller.
There was another one.
There's another Charlie Chan.
Yeah.
Warner Oland. Did we mention him?
Yeah. Roland Kibbe? Roland?
No.
Not Roland Young. There was a Roland.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was Sidney Toller.
Right.
And in this picture, the killer had a horrible mask. And the way he knew his victim was coming, he would say, take the elevator, go to 7th floor. If not there, continue to 10th floor. The person would go up in the elevator, the doors would open on the 7th floor and close. The person would look out, no one there, and now proceed up to the 10th floor. At that time, the killer pressed a button and the floor of the elevator fell out, and the person fell down. Now, we lived in an apartment building.
Oh.
I'm still going up the stairs.
Really? Isn't it funny how
When
things
you're a
like
kid,
that...
it's
I've told this story before, but I'm going to repeat it because it's just funny how things like that will hang on so long afterwards. You remember a radio program called Lights Out?
yeah, sure, yeah.
It was a radio show, came on about 11 o'clock at night in the radio days. And his voice would say, lights out, everybody. And then they would create the most gruesome murders. For example, they would drive a stake into somebody's head. And the way they would do it would be an actual stake in a watermelon. And on radio, your imagination absolutely went bananas.
Yeah.
You visualize this, and they would hear the stake going into the head. And I can still remember being over at a neighbor's house across the street, listening to Lights Out. And I had to get across the street into my house. I can remember, just like it was yesterday. And my father had come home late from work, and I had left my bicycle out on the front yard by a tree, big oak tree. And he wasn't trying to do anything. I was running across the street, and my father stepped out from behind the tree and said, here's your bike. And all he saw were a pair of shoes sitting there. I absolutely thought I was going to die because your imagination goes...
Oh, yeah.
That was one thing about radio you can't do on television. You cannot create that picture in your mind.
You know what frightened me? Walter Winchell, the beginning of that show. Do you remember that?
Good evening, Mr.
Yeah, all the shit. That thing scared me.
God, you see, all those things are hanging
Yeah.
on. I don't think we're well.
No.
We'll take a break. We'll be right back. Okay, we've got all of our childhood fantasies out in public now.
I feel better now.
It's like going through therapy, isn't it? Get all that
I
out.
feel much better.
When you were a student, who inspired you as an actor?
Well, I decided to pick the best. I picked Laurence Olivier.
Why not?
And Paul and I went to Stratford, Canada to audition for the Shakespeare Festival. And
Really?
we were in school, yeah. And I bought Paula, well, you got a break on the Canadian National Railroad if you were married. And I bought Paula a little wedding ring and a 5 and dime and stuff like
To
that.
save the fare.
Yeah, that's right. And I was sweating while I was buying the tickets, you know, and they didn't care. I mean, there's nobody on the train except us. Didn't make any difference in it. And we went through customs, you know, and we thought it was going into...
Racing, right,
Yes,
right.
yeah, we thought we were going into the Eastern Bloc or something, you know. They didn't care whether on the train or not on the train. And we auditioned Shakespeare material, and I had... what I did was I bought Laurence Olivier's records of Richard III. And I figured a good way to do this audition was just to do him. And
Since is the winter, is that the way that?
now is the winter of our
Our
discontent. Made glorious summer. And he never finished the word. And he talked like that. Yes, I thought the idea of being a great actor is not to quite finish the words. Now is the winter of great. This for a crown. Pluck it down. So I had these records.
And I memorized them all?
Yes. And and Paula did Queen Margaret from Richard III. Queen Margaret is 90 in the play.
Right.
And we went up there and we auditioned for Michael Langham, the artistic director of the festival. And after the audition, he came down in this beautiful theater, and he came down. He said, you know, you were doing Richard III. And I said, yes. And he said, have you seen the Olivier film of it? And I said, yeah, I've seen it. He said, do you happen to have any of the records? Huh? The records? Oh, yeah, I have those. Have you listened to them? And I said, yeah. He said, how many times?
Getting you deeper and deeper.
Right. He said, you know, we have him. And, and he's awfully good. And you see, we haven't seen you today, have we? And he said to Paula, he said, well, that was Queen Margaret, wasn't it?
You today.
He said, she's quite an old woman in the play. She's 90. He said, tell me, why would a lovely young girl of, how old are you, 18? He said, why would you do an old woman? He said, you know, we have old actresses who would love to have that part. He said, the next time, why don't you do people your own age? And you, why don't we just hear you instead of the records? He let me down in a lovely,
Yeah, that's nice, though, isn't it? That's kind of diplomatic. Yeah. Then did you do something else after that?
I just continued to do my impression of everybody I could think of, yes.
Well, that's what happens when you start. You subconsciously or consciously steal from people you admire.
Yeah.
Comedians have done it for years. They start out liking somebody. They go back, and I can look back in my career and find out where I was aping Jack Benny to the point where it was almost embarrassing.
Yeah.
Until I realized that I admired his timing, but you have to move away from that.
Yeah,
but everybody has done it.
It's true, and you also are looking at what you know is wonderful and good.
That works for him. You think it should work for me.
Yeah, that's
the winter of our discontent.
If only if I was English.
Do that first.
Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer.
Made glorious summer.
By this son of yours.
We have him. I like that. We have him. We'll be right back.